The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble kitchen island, sending shards skittering across the polished floor. Natalie Reeves stood frozen, her right hand still curved as if holding the glass that now lay in pieces at her feet. "Did you hear what I just said?" Mason's voice cut through the silence, as cold and sharp as the glass fragments between them. "Say it again." Natalie's voice was barely audible, her eyes fixed on the champagne seeping into the grout lines of their imported Italian tile. Mason sighed, loosening his tie with one hand, while the other gripped the edge of the counter. The sleeves of his tailored dress shirt were rolled up, revealing the tattoo he'd gotten on their honeymoon in Bali. 5 years ago. A lifetime ago. "This isn't working, Nat. Hasn't been for a long time." He spoke with the same detached efficiency he used in board meetings. "We're basically roommates already. So let's stop pretending we're something we're not." Natalie's gaze drifted to the collection of framed photos on the living room wall. Their wedding day, anniversary trips, holiday gatherings with friends who had slowly drifted away over the years. "Roommates," she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "Yes, roommates." Mason checked his watch, the vintage Rolex she'd given him for their 3rd anniversary. "I have a late meeting." "Don't wait up." He grabbed his jacket and briefcase, stepping carefully around the broken glass as if it were merely an inconvenience rather than the physical manifestation of their shattered marriage. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Natalie didn't move. She stood surrounded by shimmering glass and spilled champagne, the bottle she'd opened to celebrate their anniversary. The anniversary Mason had clearly forgotten. Only when she was certain he was gone did she allow herself to sink to the floor, her back against the kitchen island, careful to avoid the glass. She pulled her knees to her chest and finally let the tears fall. "Roommates," she whispered again, the word now taking on a different meaning. No longer a question, but the beginning of a plan. 6 months earlier. "Hey, stranger," Natalie said, leaning against the doorframe of Mason's home office. He glanced up from his computer screen, blinking as if returning from another world. "Hey, sorry, I'm just finishing this proposal. The Beijing deal is closing next week. It's almost midnight." She tried to keep her tone light, devoid of the accusation that lingered beneath. "I made pasta." "Your favorite. You should have told me. I grabbed something at the office." Mason rubbed his eyes, returning his attention to the screen. "But thanks." "Mason." Natalie stepped into the room. "We haven't had dinner together in 3 weeks." He sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. "I know, things are just crazy right now. After this deal closes, there's always another deal." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Remember when we used to talk about having kids? About that trip to the Amalfi Coast?" Mason's expression softened momentarily. A glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with at 24, the ambitious but idealistic business student with plans to change the world, not just acquire it. "Nat, the firm's about to make me partner. Once that happens, we can talk about all of that." He stood up, walking around the desk to place his hands on her shoulders. "Just a few more months, okay?" She'd heard those exact words a year ago. And the year before that. "Okay," she said, forcing a smile. "Just don't forget we have dinner at Eliana and Jasper's on Saturday. They're housewarming, remember?" "Right, of course." He kissed her forehead absently. "It's in my calendar." She knew it wasn't, but she'd remind him again on Friday. And probably again on Saturday morning. As she turned to leave, Mason called after her. "Hey, is there any of that pasta left?" For a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. "Yes, in the fridge. I can heat it up for you. No need. I'll grab it later if I get hungry." The pasta would remain untouched until Natalie threw it away 3 days later. The housewarming party was in full swing when Natalie arrived alone, offering apologies for Mason's absence. "Emergency client call. He sends his regrets." Eliana, her closest friend since college, handed her a glass of wine. "That's the 3rd time this month, Nat." "It's the job. You know how it is." The defense was automatic now, practiced to perfection. "I know that Jacob works just as many hours at the hospital, but he still makes it to dinner." Eliana's bluntness was one of the reasons Natalie loved her. No sugarcoating, just truth. They moved to a quieter corner of the living room, away from the other guests. "Are you happy, Nat?" Eliana asked, her voice low. The question struck Natalie like a physical blow. When was the last time she'd even considered her own happiness? She'd been so focused on maintaining appearances, keeping the peace, making excuses. "We're just going through a rough patch," she said finally. "All marriages do." Eliana studied her face. "A rough patch is a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. You and Mason have been drifting for years." "That's not true." But even as she said it, Natalie knew it was. The separate vacations because of conflicting schedules. The silent dinners on the rare occasions they ate together. The perfunctory kisses goodbye that felt more like habit than desire. When was the last time you two really talked? Not about work or schedules or who's picking up the dry cleaning. Natalie stared into her wine glass. "I don't know. Have you considered therapy? Or at least telling him how you feel?" "I've tried," and she had in her way. The carefully planned date nights that Mason inevitably canceled. The lingerie that remained unworn in her drawer. The attempts at conversation that somehow always circled back to work. "Maybe after he makes partner." Eliana placed a hand over Natalie's. "And what if nothing changes even then?" The question followed Natalie home that night to an empty house that felt more like a showroom than a home. Pristine and impersonal, every object in its place but devoid of life. 2 weeks later, Natalie stood in the elevator of Mason's office building, a surprise lunch in hand. She'd called his assistant, made sure his calendar was clear, and even ordered from that new bistro he'd mentioned wanting to try. As she approached the reception desk, the young man behind it greeted her with a smile. "Mrs. Reeves, it's been a while. Hi, Trent, is Mason available?" "I brought lunch," Trent's smile faltered. "He's in a meeting right now, but I can let him know you're here when he's done." His calendar showed he was free from noon to 1. Natalie tried to keep her tone casual. That was a last-minute thing. He's with Ms. Bennett from legal. The Singapore contract had some unexpected issues. Something in his tone made Natalie pause. "I see. Which conference room?" "I can wait outside." Trent hesitated. "They're actually in his office." "Perfect. I'll surprise him there." Before Trent could object, she was walking down the familiar hallway to Mason's corner office. The door was closed, but not completely. Through the narrow gap, Natalie could see Mason leaning against his desk, laughing at something. And then she saw her, Alexandra Bennett, the firm's new legal counsel. Young, brilliant, and devastatingly beautiful, according to Mason's occasional mentions of her. They weren't discussing contracts. They were eating lunch, from the very bistro Natalie had just ordered from, their heads bent close together in easy intimacy. "So, your wife really doesn't suspect anything?" Alexandra's voice drifted through the gap. "Nat?" Mason snorted lightly. "She's too busy planning dinner parties and redecorating rooms no one uses. Besides, she's gotten used to my hours. And this weekend? I told her I'm flying to Chicago for the Mercer presentation. Rooms already booked at the Peninsula. The view from the suite is incredible. There was no Mercer presentation. No trip to Chicago. Just another in a long line of lies that Natalie had chosen not to question. She backed away from the door, lunch bag clutched to her chest. Trent watched her retreat with sympathetic eyes, confirming what she already knew. This wasn't the first time Alexandra had been in Mason's office with the door nearly closed. Outside, Natalie dumped the untouched lunch in a trash can and walked 6 blocks before calling a rideshare, needing the cold air to clear her head. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Working late again." "Don't wait up," she typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on a simple, "okay." That night, Natalie lay awake in their king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. The space beside her was empty, as it had been more nights than not over the past year. But now the emptiness felt different, less like absence and more like abandonment. In the morning, she would smile when Mason returned home to shower and change. She would ask about his night, pretending to believe whatever story he offered. She would kiss him goodbye and wish him a good day, and she would begin to plan. 3 months earlier. It's a beautiful property. Mrs. Reeves. The real estate agent, Clara, smiled as they stood in the sun-drenched living room of the downtown condo. Perfect for someone looking to downsize or invest. It's just Natalie, please. She ran her hand along the quartz countertop of the kitchen island. And I'm thinking more of an investment property, something I could rent out initially. This was the 4th property she'd viewed that week. Each one smaller and more practical than their sprawling suburban home, each one solely in her name. The rental market in this area is extremely strong, Clara continued. With your credit and assets, financing shouldn't be an issue. Natalie nodded, wandering to the window that overlooked the city park. And the HOA allows short-term rentals? Yes, with some restrictions. I can email you the complete bylaws. After Mason had made partner, a celebration she'd attended with a practiced smile and champagne she couldn't taste, Natalie had finally faced the truth. Nothing was going to change. If anything, his new position had only increased his absences and intensified his relationship with Alexandra, which he didn't even bother to hide well anymore. The business trips they took together. The late-night calls that he took in the bathroom with the shower running. The unfamiliar perfume that sometimes clung to his shirts when he returned home. I'll take it, Natalie said suddenly, turning back to Clara. Let's make an offer today. Clara looked surprised but pleased. Don't you want to discuss it with your husband first? No, Natalie smiled. This one's just for me. That afternoon, she opened a new bank account at a different bank than the one she and Mason used. The next day, she transferred half of their joint savings, money she'd contributed to equally throughout their marriage. Despite Mason's higher salary, she consulted discreetly with a divorce attorney, gathering information but making no commitments yet. She began collecting important documents, tax returns, investment statements, property deeds, creating digital copies stored in an encrypted cloud account. Each step was careful, deliberate, invisible. Mason, absorbed in his work and his affair, noticed nothing. You seem different lately, Eliana commented over coffee one morning. More, centered. Natalie shrugged. I've been focusing on myself more. Taking that photography class I've always wanted to try. Making plans. Does Mason know about these plans? Mason barely knows I exist most days. The admission came easily now, without bitterness. Just a statement of fact. Are you leaving him? Eliana asked quietly. Natalie considered the question. I'm preparing to leave if I need to. But first, I think I need to know for sure if there's anything left to save. The affair with Alexandra isn't enough? Natalie had finally told Eliana about what she'd seen at Mason's office, though her friend had suspected long before. It should be, Natalie admitted. But after 8 years, I feel like I owe our marriage one last chance. A real conversation. Complete honesty. Eliana reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Just promise me you won't settle, Nat. Not anymore. I promise. And for the first time in years, Natalie felt certain of something. The anniversary dinner was Natalie's final attempt. 8 years of marriage deserved at least that much. She'd spent the day preparing, having her hair done, buying a new dress that made her feel beautiful and confident, cooking Mason's favorite meal. She'd opened the expensive champagne they'd been saving for a special occasion. When Mason called to say he'd be late, she wasn't surprised. But he did come home, earlier than she expected, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. What's all this? He asked, gesturing to the candlelit table, the carefully plated food. It's our anniversary. Natalie held out a glass of champagne. 8 years. Right. He took the glass but didn't drink. Nat, we need to talk. Something in his tone made her pause. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about us, about where we're headed. He set the glass down untouched. This isn't working anymore. What isn't working? This marriage. Us. He gestured between them. Let's be honest, we've been going through the motions for years. Natalie took a slow sip of her champagne, her hand remarkably steady. Is this because of Alexandra? Mason's eyes widened slightly before his expression smoothed back to neutral. You know about that? I'm not stupid, Mason. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. It's not just about Alexandra. Though yes, we've been seeing each other. But this is about us. We want different things. What do I want, Mason? Tell me. Her voice was calm, curious even. He faltered. You want this, he gestured around their home. The perfect house, dinner parties, maybe kids someday. The life we talked about in our 20s. And what do you want? More than this. Freedom. Excitement. My career is taking off, and I need someone who understands that. Who's part of that world? Someone like Alexandra? Yes. The admission seemed to relieve him. We connect on a different level. She challenges me. Natalie set down her glass. And I don't challenge you? That's not what I meant. Mason ran a hand through his hair. Look, I think we should consider separation. A divorce eventually. We can do it amicably. Split everything fairly. The irony of his words, coming now after she'd spent months preparing for exactly this scenario, almost made her laugh. But she kept her expression neutral. I see. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we can keep living here until we sort things out. Like roommates? Natalie finished for him. Exactly. He seemed relieved by her calm. Roommates. No need to act like we're into each other anymore. No more of this. He gestured at the anniversary dinner she'd prepared. That's when Natalie had picked up her champagne glass again, considered it for a moment, and let it slip from her fingers to shatter on the floor. 2 weeks passed in a strange domestic limbo. Mason moved his things into the guest bedroom without further discussion. They passed each other in the halls like strangers sharing temporary accommodations. He stayed out later, came home less frequently, no longer bothering with excuses. Natalie watched it all with a detached curiosity, as if observing someone else's life crumbling. She continued her routine. Work at the art gallery where she'd been gradually increasing her hours over the past year, her photography class, occasional lunches with Eliana, and she finalized her plans. On a Friday evening, when Mason had texted that he would be working late, the lie as automatic as breathing now, Natalie arranged for a moving company to come. They packed up exactly half of everything in the house, half the furniture, half the kitchenware, half the books, her clothes and personal items, the artwork she'd selected over the years that Mason had paid little attention to. By midnight, the moving truck was headed to her new condo, where Clara waited with keys and a bottle of wine. Natalie remained in the half-empty house, sitting in one of the 2 matching armchairs that had flanked their fireplace. Its partner was now in her new living room. At 2:17 a.m., she heard Mason's key in the lock. She didn't move, didn't speak, just waited for him to notice. What the hell? His voice echoed through the partially furnished space. Natalie? Natalie! He stormed into the living room, stopping short when he saw her sitting calmly in the armchair. We've been robbed. I'm calling the police. We haven't been robbed. Her voice was steady. I took my half. Mason stared at her, confusion giving way to comprehension. Your half? What are you talking about? My half of our possessions, as agreed in our prenuptial agreement in the event of a divorce. She stood up slowly. Which I filed for yesterday. He looked around the room again, taking in the deliberate pattern of the removal, 1 dining chair from each side of the table, half the books from each shelf, gaps in the artwork on the walls where her choices had hung. You can't do this, he said finally. Actually, I can. And I did. She picked up her purse from beside the chair. You'll be receiving the formal papers on Monday. I've been more than fair, exactly half of everything, including our investments and savings. The house is the only complication since we own it jointly. My lawyer will be in touch about that. Mason's face flushed with anger. This is insane. We could have worked this out like adults. Like roommates, you mean? Natalie raised an eyebrow. Isn't that what you wanted? Well, I'm moving out. Roommates don't usually share property. Where are you going? Where's all our stuff? My stuff is in my new place. As for where I'm going, that's no longer your concern. She walked past him toward the door. Oh, and Mason? Alexandra called the house phone earlier. Apparently she can't reach you. Something about dinner reservations at Maison Laurent tomorrow night at 8. I told her you'd confirm. Mason's expression shifted from anger to shock. You talked to Alexandra? We had a lovely chat, actually. Natalie smiled thinly. She was surprised to learn I knew about your relationship. Even more surprised to hear about your roommate suggestion. Apparently you told her we were already separated, that I had moved out months ago. Natalie, she seemed quite upset about the deception. Mentioned something about needing space to reconsider things. Natalie opened the front door. I'd check in with her if I were you. You had no right. Mason's voice rose. This is between us. No, Mason, there is no us anymore. You made that very clear. She stepped outside, then turned back one last time. By the way, I left the anniversary gift I bought you on the kitchen counter. 8 years of marriage deserved at least that much. The door closed behind her with a decisive click, cutting off whatever response Mason might have made. In her car, Natalie finally allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling something between panic and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She had done it. After months of planning, of pretending nothing was wrong while preparing for everything to fall apart, she had finally stepped into her new life. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Eliana. It's done. Coming home now. Home. Not the house she had shared with Mason, filled with carefully selected furnishings and void of genuine happiness, but the condo downtown that represented her fresh start. As she drove through the quiet streets, Natalie allowed herself one look back in the rearview mirror at the house growing smaller in the distance. 8 years of memories, both good and bad, receding into the past where they belonged. The tears she had expected didn't come. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Relief. 3 months later. That's perfect, Natalie said, adjusting the aperture on her camera. The light is exactly right now. Her client, a local restaurateur opening his 3rd location, nodded in satisfaction as Natalie continued capturing images of the stylishly plated signature dishes. Her reputation for food and interior photography had grown steadily over the past few months, referrals bringing in more work than she could have anticipated. These are going to look amazing on the website, the chef said, peering over her shoulder at the display screen. That's the idea. Natalie smiled, the expression coming easily now. I'll have the edited photos to you by Friday. After finishing the shoot, she packed up her equipment and checked her phone. A text from her lawyer. Final papers ready for signature. Can you come by the office tomorrow? The divorce had progressed more smoothly than she'd expected. After the initial shock and anger, Mason had eventually agreed to her terms. She kept her condo and her half of their assets. He kept the house, with a buyout payment to her for her share of the equity. And they went their separate ways. Alexandra had indeed reconsidered their relationship after learning of Mason's deceptions. According to Eliana, who still moved in some of the same social circles, Alexandra had ended things within weeks of Natalie's departure. Not that it mattered anymore. Mason's romantic life was no longer her concern. Outside the restaurant, Natalie paused to enjoy the spring sunshine, in no hurry to get back to her condo. Though smaller than the house she'd shared with Mason, it felt more like home than any place she'd lived before. She'd decorated it with only things that brought her joy, filled it with plants and color and artwork created by local artists she'd met through the gallery. Most importantly, it was hers alone, a space where she answered to no one, where silence meant peace rather than distance. Her phone rang as she walked toward her car. The screen showed Mason Reeves. She hesitated before answering. Hello, Mason. Natalie. His voice sounded different, humbler perhaps. I just got the final papers. Yes, I did too. She unlocked her car but didn't get in, leaning against the door instead. Is there a problem? No, no problem. He paused. I just wanted to talk to you before we make this official. Natalie sighed. We've said everything that needed saying, don't you think? Not everything. Another pause. I miss you, Nat. The words hung between them, traveling through cell towers and satellites to reach her ear, yet somehow falling flat. Mason. I know. It's too late. His voice cracked slightly. I screwed up. I took you for granted. But seeing how well you're doing without me, hearing about your photography taking off, I realized what I threw away. 3 months ago, even 1 month ago, these words might have affected her, might have stirred the embers of a love she'd spent years trying to keep alive. Now, they were just words. Is that why you called? To try to reconcile? She asked gently. I don't know. Maybe? He sounded uncertain, a quality she'd rarely heard in his voice during their marriage. The house feels empty. Even with all the furniture I replaced, it's not the same. Things rarely are. I ended things with Alexandra, completely. I heard? You did? He sounded surprised. It's not important, Mason. Natalie looked up at the clear blue sky. What matters is that we're both moving forward, separately. Is that really what you want? The question was genuine, lacking the manipulation she might have expected. And for the first time in their conversation, Natalie took a moment to truly consider her answer. Yes, she said finally. It is. What we had, it wasn't real, not for a long time. We were playing roles, going through motions. Like roommates, Mason said quietly. Exactly. Natalie smiled sadly. And now we can both find what we really want. What makes us genuinely happy. Are you? Happy, I mean. I'm getting there. And she was. Each day brought new possibilities, new connections, new growth. It's not always easy, but it's real. Mason was silent for a moment. I never meant to hurt you. I know. And strangely she did. The anger that had fueled her through those final months of their marriage had faded, leaving understanding in its wake. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. But intentions don't change outcomes, Mason. No, they don't. Another pause. I'm selling the house. Too many memories. That's probably wise. The anniversary gift you left. His voice softened. The watch. I wear it every day. Natalie closed her eyes briefly. The vintage watch had been a find from a small shop in London during a business trip the previous year, a trip she'd taken alone while Mason canceled at the last minute. She'd kept it for their anniversary anyway, holding on to hope until the very end. I'm glad. She straightened up, opening her car door. I should go, Mason. I have a client waiting for photos. Of course. He cleared his throat. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. And I hope you find someone who deserves you. Natalie slid into the driver's seat. That's the thing, Mason. I already have. You're seeing someone? The surprise in his voice was evident. No. She smiled to herself. I've found myself. And that's enough for now. After ending the call, Natalie sat in her car for several minutes, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. The conversation with Mason had stirred memories, but they no longer held power over her. They were just scenes from a previous chapter, important to her story but not defining it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eliana. Gallery opening tonight? New artist I think you'll love. Natalie smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Pick you up at 7. She started the car and pulled into traffic, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the city she was rediscovering on her own terms. Ahead lay an evening with friends, a potential new artist collaboration, and countless possibilities she had yet to imagine. Behind her, visible in the rearview mirror for just a moment before she turned the corner, was the restaurant where she'd just completed a successful photo shoot. Another job well done, another step forward. Natalie adjusted the mirror, focusing on the road ahead rather than what lay behind. The future, her future, was waiting, and she was finally ready to meet it on her own terms. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's roommate, simply as herself.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.